Pucks with Haggs is brought to you by Prizepicks and the Gametime app.
Welcome to another edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, powered by Prizepicks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. Thank you very much for joining us. As always, I'm your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. Subscribe and get yourself a premium membership. Get all of my NHL writing and my Bruins writing sent straight directly to your inbox. I also write columns 3 times a week for the Boston Sports Journal. I also do a Q&A for them. So sign up for a membership of the Boston Sports Journal. You get the Q&A. You get to ask me questions, read the Bruins stuff, all of that good stuff, and for all the sports teams. So definitely check that out. Today I have Boston.com's Conor Ryan and Boston Herald's Steve Conroy with me. Guys, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to be here.
Yes, everybody's glad to be on a podcast on this snowy Thursday. What day is Thursday? Yeah, snowy Thursday morning. Newton, the city of Newton, there's 1 inch of snow on the ground, so they canceled school, so the kids are home today. Good times. I know Steve's kids are a little more rugged. They did have school today, even if they were sick and didn't make it. But I'm glad to see the city of Boston is not canceling school at the drop of a hat, Steve.
Yeah. Some people in my house that weren't happy about it, but
I'm sure that's the case. My kids are still sleeping right now. If that lets you know how happy they were that there was no school today. All right, before we get into it, let's thank our sponsors real quick. Download the Prizepicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prizepicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prizepicks, run your game. If you need any kind of tickets, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Connor, what time is it?
Game time.
That's right. It's game time. That's correct. All right. 3-2 loss to the Rangers. Steve, I thought it was an okay effort from the Bruins last night. Certainly, they were close. They were in it right till the end. Had some close chances with the goalie pulled, and could have tied that. This is another one of those games where I feel like I'd feel a lot better about this Bruins team if they could find a way to tie it and at least get a point in a game like this. It seemed pretty clear to me that was an important game for the Rangers last night. They kind of had to win that game, and they brought that kind of desperate effort. I think they outblocked the Bruins 21-9 in blocked shots. They outhit them. Like the effort categories, which can be deceiving sometimes. But I thought last night showed a Rangers team that was very desperate to get that game. The Bruins a little less so. I think there was probably a little maybe fatigue in there as they're finishing out the string here and trying to put everything they have into all of these games. So they came up just a little bit short. And I feel like that's another time this year where maybe they could have had a point and they just weren't able to do it.
Yeah, I thought for the most part they played like they have to play to win. They only gave up 22 shots. They didn't have much going offensively. They only got 17 shots on net, but I think there were some chances there that didn't make it to the net that were pretty good chances, like the Morgan Geekie chance. He, had a wide open net, and the puck blew up on him on the stick in the first period. But it was just critical mistakes at critical times. The first goal was JT Miller got in on the forecheck and caused a turnover. Bing bang, Panarin puts it in the net, and then of course the shorthanded goal. And it's too bad because the power play last few games had been looking a little better. The puck had been moving around, and they'd been they were maintaining momentum through their power play, even if they didn't score. But last night, the power play was awful. They got one right off the bat, never even attempted a shot. And then, of course, the one in the third period where they, decided the game.
Yeah, I mean, and special teams is a big storyline for this year with the Bruins and how bad it's been. Both power play and penalty kill at times just have not been able to get it together for either unit consistently this year. Definitely, I think power play has been more of a consistent struggle than the penalty kill. Penalty
kill. I thought it's been pretty good.
Yeah,
and
it's had pockets where it's been awful though. That's the thing,
yes, Yes, especially on the road. But they had 2 good kills in the second period, and it looked like they were in the process of a really good kill in the third period. But then, as soon as Marchand steps out of the box, it ends up in the net.
Yeah. So, you look at the special teams over the balance of the season. That's going to be another thing. If they miss the playoffs, you can look at the special teams as one of the big culprits this year, for sure. And it creeped up again last night. Though I will say that shorthanded goal, I thought McAvoy defended it pretty well. They did get a good bounce in order to get that goal. That there's a little bit of luck involved in that play as well that wasn't on the Bruins side. But Connor, as I said before, I feel like, they did play a pretty good game. It just wasn't good enough to get a point. And I feel like some of these road games, they need to find a way to get it to overtime somehow if they want to be in the playoffs. They need to find a way to get a point out of a game like that. When the other team is clearly more desperate, probably has a little bit more juice, you play a pretty good game, and you want to be able to come away with it with something rather than leaving 3-2 like, wish we could have been a little bit better, wish we could have gotten a point.
Yeah, Joe, it's better than some of these other road losses, right, where they've just been completely uncompetitive. Like, you look at the last time they were down there in New Jersey. Like, you're not losing 5-1. I guess that is progress, right? If we're trying to find some sort of silver linings here. But, I think when you're at this point of the season where points are at a premium, it's like you look at a game like this where, again, to Steve's point, I think they played how they need to play. It's just a few critical lapses kind of kill you there. You look even like they got a point on the road against Ottawa, a few weeks ago. That feels like one where it's, all right, you got to come away with 2 points there where you're holding on to a 2-goal lead with 5 minutes to go. Like, there are just stretches here where you look at how tight the playoff race is now, where every single game is going to matter. It's not just every single game for you, but it's also looking at the standings to see what 6 or 7 teams are also doing. That's how kind of crowded the playoff field is right now at this point. So when you're the Bruins, and yes, this wasn't you didn't go off the rails like some of these last couple of road games, but what are they now, like 1-8-1, I think, in their last 10 road games? Like, there are stretches here, and yes, there's been some tough matchups here and there, but if you're a team that is trying to make the playoffs, like, you can play really well at home. That's what the Bruins have done, but you got to be somewhat respectable on the road, and doesn't mean you have to win every game 4-1, take care of business. Sometimes it means winning ugly, but it's about winning. It's about getting some points here. And once again, the Bruins just didn't do enough at critical moments to come away with a win there. And if this team, I don't imagine this team just completely bottoming out, and all of a sudden we look at mid-April and they're out 10 plus points out of a playoff race. But if it's 3, 4, 5 points, you got to look at a couple of these games, especially this one last night, as ones that you're like, man, what 1 or 2 points could have done here or there during this season. So it's frustrating.
It is. It's not even winning on the road, Connor. For me, I think there's been 4 or 5 games where there were 1-goal losses on the road, where if the Bruins could have found a way to push it to get it to overtime and at least get that point before the bottom completely falls out and they lose the game, if they can dig down deep and find a way to throw everything at the net, cause chaos and mayhem in front. And, the goals that get typically scored against them sometimes late in the third period to tie a game and get it to overtime. They have not been capable enough of forcing that goal at the end to at least get to OT and find a way. You're talking 4 or 5 games that were 1-goal losses on the road where you could have pushed, or at home even for that matter, that you could have pushed to overtime. That's 4 or 5 points that I think are going to be the difference between getting the playoffs or not getting in the playoffs at the end of the year. And they keep falling falling short in all of those instances, in my mind. And last night was another one where you're going to go back at the end of the year and look, if they miss it by just a razor's edge, it's going to be because of those games. And it's too bad, because I thought, to Steve's point, and what I thought too, was a pretty good effort last night. I thought they played to their identity and they did pretty well. They just weren't rewarded for it and couldn't find a way to get the ball over the goal line. One positive that I do find from these last few games, and just from the stretch in general, is the experience that Mason Lohrei and Matt Poitras are getting in these games. It's not always great. Sometimes it's a tough experience. Mason Lohrei had a tough game a couple games ago, was singled out a little bit by Joe Sacco afterwards. Matt Poitras was quiet last night, did not have a great game. There's been a few sprinkled in there where he hasn't done a ton. But I think there's also been instances where he's really stepped up, and consistently, I think he's been, at least getting chances and setting up chances for his teammates in a lot of these games, and maybe putting him in a third line sort of center role is a little more what he can do right now and what the fair expectation is for him. But I think in the long run, I think these are both NHL players that are going to be with the Bruins for a while. And I think playing these games, the ups and downs, the intensity of it all, how much the points matter and the games matter, I think that is like the final sort of piece of their development into NHL players. And this is invaluable, the experience that they're getting. Now, there's going to be times they might lose games because the young guys make mistakes, but I think you have to live with that, Connor, based on the experience that these guys are getting and the sort of, the invaluable lessons that they're learning in the second half of the season.
Yeah, I think when you look at this season and trying to find the silver lining, especially if this team does come up short of a playoff run here, it's all about finding, ways to build or find some sort of positives. And I agree that I think Lohrei and Poitras, it hasn't been perfect, but I think they're showcasing enough that they can be guys you can, add to this team, build around moving forward. And for a team that's so desperate to find, some young talent, some guys that you can pencil in moving forward, I agree that I think they both look really strong as of late. Like even, Lohrei he's a guy that you look at his player profile, the fact that, yes, he is prone to making some mistakes in the D zone. But I think the one thing that's kind of stood out to me about him is that even though he's had a couple of rough games, right, he always seems to kind of bounce back. It doesn't snowball into 4 or 5 games where you're like, oh, all right, this has kind of been a rough stretch here. I thought he's played pretty well since that mishap against Winnipeg. And again, those are two guys that, they're not perfect, right? But I think you look at, their skill set, what they can provide. They're two guys that, listen, this is a team that you look all across their depth chart. There's a lot of holes, a lot of areas where you're like, they could upgrade that spot. I think you look at what Lohrei, projects as a playmaking defenseman, what Poitras could be as a middle six playmaking centerman. I mean, they need as much forward help as they can get. I think those are two guys that, all right, you have the foundational pieces, the Pasternaks, the McAvoys, Swaymans. Those are two guys that, even though there's been some growing pains, you can look at next year, especially as guys that, you can plug into the lineup and should continue to take steps forward. It may not always be pretty, but I think you've seen the positives, especially as of late with those two guys. And in a season where not a lot has gone right for this team, I think that is encouraging.
It is. And to your point, Mason Lohrei does not lack in confidence. That is a great quality that he has, is he knows what he is. He knows what his strengths are. He's going to continue to try to make plays and push the envelope with his skill and a little bit of the high risk stuff that he does sometimes. Sure, every once in a while, it's going to blow up in your face and you're going to put a puck right on somebody's stick in front of your own net like he did, which that's just there for everybody to see. It was a huge blunder, but that's part of his game, and part of what he does is some of that high risk stuff that allows him to be successful. And I do think with Poitras too, a big problem with him last year and the beginning of this year, I think, was a little bit of a crisis of confidence at times. He lost his willingness to try things offensively and to really try to make plays, because I think he wasn't sure he belonged here. And I think that stint down in the AHL showed him, you dominate at this level. That's where you're supposed to be. And he's been a different, more confident player, even when he's had a quiet game or a tough stretch. I think he bounces back, and you're starting to see the player that he's going to be. Steve, I would look at both of those players as big time, silver linings in the experience that they're getting this season, whether the Bruins make the playoffs or not.
Yeah, it was around this time last year that I was thinking maybe, Mason Lohrei would be a good left wing for this team, because he really wasn't great in his own end. He wasn't assertive in his own end. And I had some serious questions there. And then when he got thrown into the fire in the Toronto series, I saw, I'm sitting at the morning skate saying, oh, man, this kid's they're throwing this kid in there. And he stepped up. He played really well. And as Conor was saying, he's a kid who, he may make a big mistake in the one he made against Winnipeg. But, every game since then, he's been pretty good. And so he's a kid that can handle, his own screw ups. He's got to get, even that out a little bit and get it out of his game a little bit. But, he's a pretty confident kid, and I think he's going to be okay. Poitras, I like Poitras a lot. He's kind of in a tough spot right now because of the team's lack of scoring depth on the wing. He's not quite ready to play a top six role, a 200-foot game. So they have to play him at third line center, and he's really not playing with any bona fide scorers, which is kind of a tough situation for him to be in.
He's looked pretty good setting up Pasternak the last few games, hasn't he?
He did.
When he's out there on the ice with him?
He did. But those are only for quick hits,
Yep.
after penalties. And we saw in the Buffalo game where he had a real tough time,
Yep.
In the defensive zone.
Yep.
So I don't think he's quite ready for that. With his size, is he ever going to be ready for that? I don't know. But he's obviously got some skill. He's got some savvy in the offensive zone, and he is a competitor. He's a competitor. He sticks his nose in despite the size, and he's going to be a player. He's obviously an NHL player. What he's going to be, I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, I think top line center is probably asking too much. I think maybe the ceiling is second line center for him for that. The thing with Steve that I like is, he's not the biggest guy in the world, but like he is ultra competitive on pucks.
Yeah.
And he wins a ton of battles. And he like the one thing that could hold him back from being that is if he gets hurt, because he puts himself in some of those positions where he's hard nosed and he's going after plays, and he maybe does things sometimes that you wouldn't expect a guy his size to do, and goes places you wouldn't expect a guy his size to go. And maybe that's going to end up like resulting in injuries sometimes, like it did last year when he hurt his shoulder. But I think really when you look at like the makeup of him, when you look at the skill level, when you look at some of the things that he does, yes, he's going to continue to always need to work on his skating to make sure, which I think has been better this year than it was last year. And he looks faster, a little faster, taking the puck up through the neutral zone and carrying the puck up the ice. So like when you look at all of those things together, I think you see a guy that could be like a not David Krejci, but a David Krejci type player maybe, and what he can do and the role that he can fill when he's at his best, when he gets a few more years and matures and sort of is exactly where he's going to be. But I just look at him and I see an NHL player, and I see a guy with a lot of upside. He's still got things to learn. And like, that's part of the thing this year is like part of the calculation with this team is that there's a lot going on with this team. There's a lot of guys that are in the last years of their deals. There's a few young guys, key young guys that are trying to break in. Like there's a lot of stuff happening with this team that it's going to cause them to lose games sometimes, like playing young guys and putting them in your lineup in key spots like they've done. And this is something that the fans clamor for, right? They want to see Fabian Lysell. They want to see Merkulov. They want to see all these players. But they don't understand, I think, sometimes that, yes, if you can put those players in your lineup, but guess what? You're going to lose games because those players are young and they're going to make mistakes, and there's a learning curve in the NHL. And that's just something that goes along with it, Connor. And part of the reason at times this team is struggling sort of with wins and losses is like because they have to do things like that and develop these players at the NHL level and sort of deal with the mistakes that are being made.
Yeah, it's almost kind of like, the team on the ice kind of has that identity crisis, right? If we don't really know what exactly this team is, I think you're starting to see what they need to do or what the blueprint is for them to be successful. It's a lot of kind of low event hockey, protecting your own net, those kinds of things. But even listen to like Don Sweeney on the broadcast yesterday talking about kind of what the next steps are. And it's kind of more or less a little bit what we heard from Cam Neely last month, but also like, well, we're hurt. So like, we're still trying to figure out what we're doing. And it's like, if you're a team like that, where you're at this crossroads and it's like, I get the appeal of being like, listen, we're still right in it. Like, we're not in the playoff picture right now, but we're a few points out. We're playing better hockey the last couple of weeks, but also like, do we lean into a retool when maybe that is like the best, the best path moving forward, which would then you would imagine lead to like moving off pieces. Maybe that's when you're able to bring up a guy like Merkulov or Lysell and you live with those mistakes because you're not necessarily going for a playoff spot now, but they're kind of in that limbo right now where it's I'm sure for ownership and the front office you're tempted by the fact that you're kind of right in it, and if you can find a kind of deal that can help you out, I'm sure they'd love to do that. But the appeal of selling off pieces, kind of hitting a restart and punting on this year and bringing up some more of those young guys, that also isn't the worst thing. I'd rather like if you're going to either be setting yourself up for a first round knockout punch or you're not going to make the playoffs entirely, you'd rather see what guys like Lysell and Merkulov have at this level and what they can provide. I'm not saying they're going to be good, right? Because we haven't seen a lot, whether it's been at training camps or during, smaller call-ups earlier on. But I'd rather just figure out what you have in those players so that way we don't go into next training camp in September and we have to ask about them again as could they get a middle six spot? Let's find out what they have over an extended stretch here. But I can't see the Bruins doing that unless they decide, all right, this year we don't have it. We're moving a couple of guys further down the lineup and bringing those guys up. I can't see it all of a sudden being a case where tomorrow Merkulov is up and they think he's going to be tilting the scales to help them for a playoff push or anything like that.
No, it's going to have to be an organizational decision, I think, to go with a few young guys. And it's difficult looking right now and feeling optimistic about them making the playoffs just based on the numbers, the chances, statistical chance that they have based on the teams that are in front of them in the Atlantic Division, based on games played, based on all of that stuff. But still, what are they, a point out of a wild card spot right now?
I believe so.
I believe so. I still think they're in a position where they could probably do both. I think they could justify trading a piece or two that they believe is not part of the long-term, picture here and is not going to stick around. And the other part of the equation now is how much the salary cap is blowing up over the next few years and the amount of money that they're going to have to spend, which might be a little frightening based on the way Elias Lindholm has played. But, that's got to enter into the equation too. Does that change who's in your long-term picture now because you have more money? But bottom line is I think they could potentially trade a piece or two that's not part of the long-term picture and bring in a minor piece that's not going to cost them a lot. And they could kind of do both this year, continue to maybe at least nominally try to compete for a playoff spot and see if the veteran players and the guys they have can step up and earn it, while also recouping some future assets by trading away a piece or two that's not going to be part of the picture here. Steve, what do you think the most realistic sort of pathway is for the Bruins ahead of the trade deadline?
Yeah, I something along those lines. I don't think they should trade Brad Marchand. I know that's been kicked around a lot.
You and I are on the same page on that one.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to get a king's ransom for him, sure. But from what I hear, that's not going to happen. Maybe that would change if he lights it up in the Four Nations tournament by playing with, Nathan McKinnon and Sidney Crosby if he's healthy enough. But, I've been told that, it's probably a second round draft pick, maybe a middling prospect as well. And if that's all you're going to get back for a Brad Marchand, you keep him. You keep his leadership, and I know he's taken some bad penalties lately. Although last night, I thought that was a little ticky tack, but you keep him. Other guys, I mean, you really have to look at it. If you don't think Trent Frederick is part of your long-term future, you have to see what you can get for him.
Yep.
You got to think about Charlie Coyle as well. He's got 1 year left. That may make him bring his value up a little bit. So you have to look at that. But as far as blowing it up, I don't think they have. When you've got the goalie, you've got your number one defenseman, and you've got your star winger. You've got those pieces. It's not a blow up situation.
No, it's not.
I mean, you can tinker around at the deadline. Yes.
The bottom line is with the blow it up scenario and people saying that, the teams that are consistently the worst in the NHL, the bottom dwellers, the teams that get the first few picks in the draft, the one common denominator they have is awful goaltending, horrible goaltending. So that's how you sink to the bottom, is if you have a goaltending by committee where they're not good goalies, where you're letting up a ton of soft goals. The Bruins goaltending and the backbone of their team is too good for them to blow it up. They're never going to sink to the bottom and get the high lottery picks as long as those players are in place. It's just not going to happen. It's not realistic.
Yeah, they're getting good goaltending now, especially with Swayman in the net.
Yep.
Early in the season, it was the first time in 15 years that they hadn't gotten good goaltending, and it was kind of shocking to see.
Yep. Yeah. And it was, I'm sure it was shocking to the players on the ice too.
Yeah.
They weren't used to it either. Let's take a pause real quick to talk about Prizepicks. Prizepicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and you watch the winnings roll right in. It's fun and it's super simple. The big game is almost here and it's now or never. Don't miss out on the last football game of the season with Prizepicks, the best place to win cash while watching the big game. Prizepicks is also giving away a free pick for the big game where one of the starting quarterbacks will only need to throw 1 yard to win. That's right. If you're correct on at least one more stat projection, you win real cash. And I believe they picked Patrick Mahomes at 0.5 yards. So check that out. That's a no-brainer. I think you're going to get that one done if you go there for Prizepicks. Prizepicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prizepicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Check out the promos tab to tail any of our Super Sweat Millie winners, big game lineups, whatever that is. If you tell a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. Make your holidays bigger and brighter with Prizepicks, the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. Think Jalen Hurts will get more than 250 passing yards this weekend? Will Patrick Mahomes pass for more than 1.5 touchdowns? Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on Prizepicks. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prizepicks, and Prizepicks also offers MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. So take all that in mind and download the Prizepicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prizepicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prizepicks. Run your game. I'm going to give this to Connor, Steve, since you basically just answered the question and what you thought right before I ran that Prizepicks promo. This is the tweet of the week from mhall3333. Joe, a question for your next podcast. I understand the argument trading 63 would leave a void in leadership. True. Maybe 73 isn't ready, but wouldn't 63 net a better return than anyone else? It seems to me now is the time with his contract up. No news on a new deal. Connor, your thoughts on potentially trading Brad Marchand, the value of it, and whether it should be done?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't see the return being what it would be to moving a guy like him in terms of just his leadership, what he provides. And I also think you look at the Bruins and, maybe I'm just the optimist here, but I think when you look at the fact that, as you said, Joe, like the Bruins can't rebuild because they've got the toughest part out of the way, right? Yeah. They've got the number one goalie. They've got a number one defenseman. They've got a superstar forward who's dragging this team into the playoffs. Like he's just been unbelievable the last couple months. Which is why they could just trade again, as Steve said, guys who maybe aren't going to be here long term, a Frederick, what have you, and they could still somehow make the playoffs just because Pasternak's going nuclear and Swayman's playing at a high level. That's all that this team might need just to sneak in. Doesn't mean they're going to go very far, but you can. Again, accelerate kind of this retool right now while also, again, having an off season where you can be a little bit more aggressive. And I think, if the return is like a second or a prospect or something, I'd rather keep a guy like Brad Marchand who, is still an established leader on this team, still have that stability there with a guy like that who, leads by example, holds guys accountable. And, even if he's not the same top 6 player, I think that's still a guy that, you keep around moving forward, especially I'm very curious as to what his next contract is going to be, but I think you can still have a guy that is a useful asset without it being, breaking the bank, especially when you factor in, the cap jumping up as well. So I think that's a guy that you look at his value to this team and the fact that if the Bruins go into this offseason, with a plan to, either be bold with retooling their roster, they should be better next year. I still think this is a team that thinks they can kind of retool on the fly, and especially when you have those foundational franchise stars in place. So it's not kind of like when the Flyers a few years ago traded Claude Giroux, right? Where it's listen, we're going to be in the thick of it for a while here. Let's get a top return and move on from this guy because we're going to be climbing uphill for the next couple of years. The Bruins have Pastrnak at 28, Swayman at 26, right? McAvoy 27. For them, it's all about, I think, being bold this offseason to really kind of rework that roster. And I think a guy like Marchand is kind of still in that equation. He may not be the top 6 guy that we've seen him be for the last decade or so, but I think he can still be a useful player and a guy that still holds a lot of value into a team that is trying to kind of win now, right?
Yeah, and the leadership piece, I think, is important, and the link to the teams that actually won something is important, and him being a reminder to some of those other players of what it takes to get there is important. I think, I think there's a huge void if Brad Marchand gets traded, leadership-wise, presence-wise, toughness-wise, being mentally tough, like all the different things that he brings to the table, like making others accountable, even if it's uncomfortable sometimes. Like, I think he does a lot of those different things. And I think maybe sometimes the other players don't like it, but I think it's something you need in an NHL dressing room in order to have success and in order to win and in order to get the best out of everybody. And you need leadership that's willing to do that and have those tough conversations sometimes. And I think he's a guy that's willing to do that. And I think you take him out of that, and I think there's a huge accountability factor that leaves with him that's extremely important to have success. The interesting thing, though, and he can still play, right? Like, he's not the player he was 5 years ago. I think there are times where plays die on his stick where they didn't in the past. And that's just because sometimes he doesn't have the legs. That's sometimes because, maybe the hands aren't what they were as far as – and maybe it's because he's trying to do it super fast to try to make up for a lost half step, and that's why he's losing the puck a little bit more. That could be a possibility as well, where it looks like it's his hands, but it's actually him trying to just move super fast to try to make up for a little lack of skating explosion that maybe he doesn't have anymore. But bottom line is he can still play and produce on the ice. He's a great leader for that team. So under no circumstances would I trade Brad Marchand. I think he should be a Bruin for life. The contract thing is interesting. He's at that age where he could start doing 1-year deals with incentives, like some other players have done when they're not sure how many more years they're going to play, or he could do like a 2 or 3 year deal at pretty reasonable price, depending on how long he wants to play and how long the Bruins want to sign him for. I just hope it doesn't turn into a Steve Stamkos situation where the Bruins want him for 1-year deals and he wants more, and it ends up becoming acrimonious. I don't think that's going to happen, but we'll see. But Steve, the one thing I would say, and I'm in the camp of never trading him no matter what, I just wouldn't do it. What if it becomes a first-round pick? What if all of a sudden, as we get closer to the trade deadline and teams get desperate for talent and desperate for somebody that can put them over the top, they start, because that's when it's going to happen, right? If the value is going to go up on a player like that, a rental, it's going to be right before the deadline when teams are getting desperate. What if it becomes a pretty good prospect and a first-round pick for Brad Marchand? Do you entertain it then? Is it a little more tempting?
Yeah, I mean, you never say never on anyone, right? But you got to look at next year, okay? I would bet my life that they're going to get better goaltending early in the season that they did not get this year. That's one of the things that really put them behind the 8 ball. There's a lot of disjointedness to their play as well. Adding Lindholm and Zadorov, that they're still trying to hammer some of that stuff out. But they're going to get better goaltending next year, so they'll be in the thick of it. I have a tough time moving on from him. If it's a first-round draft pick and a real good prospect that could be, be in the lineup next year, maybe you think about it. I'm not sure if it's going to happen though.
Yeah, no. And what if you had some kind of, what if there was some kind of, and we've seen this happen a few times, where you could allow him to get traded to a contender this year and have that conversation hey, we're going to trade you now for the rest of this season, but expect you back next year and we'll sign you as a free agent. If they were both on board for that and they were getting good assets in return for him and he was going to come back, I think that would be a savvy move by the Bruins if they felt like this was not going to be the year. I know optically, it wouldn't, I don't think it would pass the smell test in a lot of ways, and I'm not sure Brad Marchand would ever sign on for that or agree to that or want to come back if he was traded.
I don't see that.
I don't either, but it's an interesting thing to think about, Connor, as far as getting some good assets for him and keeping him in the fold. If you could pull that off and do both, I mean, that would be the kind of move that could help the team short term and long term.
Yeah, no, I mean, that'd be great in terms of getting those assets and having them back again. It's one of those ones where it's kind of the same exercise, right? As I feel like a lot of people, when they look at the free agent class 2 years down the road, right? And it's like, oh man, they're going to have Eichel out there. Every time we go into that, and all of a sudden these guys then immediately re-up with their teams,
Right.
like during
Yeah.
training camp, what have you. It sounds great in principle. And then when you actually have a guy who has that kind of separation from a team, when you decide to trade them, they're like, you know what, this is kind of a clean break. I'll ride out the rest of my career somewhere else. Maybe I like where I'm going. Maybe I like playing with my buddy McKinnon out in Colorado and we go on a deep cup run or something like that, right?
Yep.
Like, so I do think you open up a lot of risk in terms of hoping something like that plays out. But yeah, I mean, I think if you are weighing trading Marchand, it all comes down to this front office looking at how far away they think they are. Like maybe they think like this is a longer thing where we have to really kind of retool, and maybe it is a 2 or 3 year kind of thing instead of a let's be bold this offseason and kind of get right back at it. And it comes down to also what the price is. If it's a second and a prospect, no thanks. If it's, you know, what the Rangers got from like a 34-year-old Rick Nash, where it's a first-round pick and a guy like Ryan Lindgren, who was like an AHL guy, but quickly became kind of a guy that for quite a few years, I think you'd see him on the ice and Bruins fans be like, nah, that guy sure looks like a Bruin, the way he kind of plays, and that's kind of a useful roster piece. You look at, I mean, Giroux got, you know, what, a first, and Owen Tippett, who's a regular guy for that team as well. So if a team is going to get desperate, and you saw what, San Jose get a first and a fourth for Granlund and Cody Ceci, like if this ends up being a trade deadline where there's not a lot of sellers, and you can kind of see that being the case where so many of these teams are kind of 4, 5, 6 points out of a playoff spot right now. If you are one
East,
of the two
everybody's
teams,
in it.
yeah, if you are one of those teams that decides you are open for business, and there's going to be a lot of teams that, you know, whether right or wrong, think they are a piece or two away from, you know, making a playoff push, especially so many of these teams that haven't made the playoffs in a couple of years now and are desperate just to get a few games in April, even if their team isn't good enough to really go on a run. Maybe that does change the complexion, because it does feel like if the Bruins do lean into a bit of a retool for this season, you probably could get some guys going for prices way beyond kind of what they've shown, especially this year, right? Like Frederick hasn't helped his value, but if there's a team that sees what he could be or what his skill set is, maybe you are getting like a second or something like that for a guy that really has kind of struggled to get a lot of traction this year.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. Let's take a break real quick. Also, to talk about our friends at Gametime. Take the guesswork. I got buying tickets with Gametime for obviously Bruin tickets, but also if you're looking for tickets for the Celtics or even comedy or concert tickets as well, Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. The game of the week for this week that would make an outstanding post-holiday buy is the Saturday, February 8th showdown between the Bruins and the Golden Knights at the Garden. The super deal is $192 for Loge Corner 3 seats, which is pretty great value for Bruins tickets in this new year. There's a lot of features at Gametime, including priority Gametime picks. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, comedy, concerts, theater, etc. All in pricing. You toggle this feature and it shows you the total up front with no surprise fees at the checkout. And my personal favorite, the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Gametime app today, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. What time is it, Steve?
Rumor has it it's game time.
That's right. It is game time. Steve is on the money with that one. All right. Final segment here before we go, boys. Steve, I think you are absolutely right to say that a big part of them stumbling out of the gate that is not going to repeat itself is Jeremy Swayman in the goaltending not being great to start the year. Super extenuating circumstances with him holding out of training camp. I think we all expected he was going to struggle at the start, not only because of the holdout, but also because he was the number one guy for the first time and had that kind of pressure on his shoulders, and there was an adjustment there. So it was a perfect storm for him to struggle. I think since probably the beginning of January, post-holiday, he's been excellent, and he's been like himself, very good, and showing he's back to form, so they can expect that, next year and beyond. The other part of it for me is David Pastrnak. he was awful the first few months of the season. Awful. He was scoring goals, but like when you watched him on the ice, he looked lost. He was taking bad penalties, very sloppy play, lots of turnovers, just not himself. Did not look good the first few months of the season, and that played into them having a horrible start as well. I say that because I have to give him credit now and just due for what he's done since the beginning of the year. He's been the best player in the league, the most explosive, big game breaker, back to his best self. And he is single-handedly trying to carry the Bruins to a playoff spot in a lot of respects with the way that he's playing. Just been as bad as he was the first few months of the season. He's been that good, I think, since January 1. And I think, you need to give credit where it's due for Pastrnak really turning it up and being the superstar player that he is and helping to carry this team, Steve. And it just does make you realize how much this Bruins team right now offensively relies on him to be the straw that stirs the drink, and how they have to find some more players that can provide offense because they rely on him for so much heavy lifting right now.
Yeah. And, you don't know how much, he missed a bunch of training time in the off season. He talked about it, kind of screwing up his usual regimen. I think he said 4 to 6 weeks or something where he didn't do much. And then, there was the experiment with him, Elias Lindholm as his center, and it just didn't work for whatever reason. So that played into it. I don't know if he was trying to do too much or what, but he was not good early in the season, and that contributed to where they are now. But you're right; he's playing fantastic right now, and he really is. Putting the team on his shoulders offensively, and even defensively, he's been a little more responsible, getting back on the back check and things like that. So hats off to him now for how he's playing.
Yeah, and he's playing more like him, right? Like he's always going to have, because he's a high risk offensive player, he's always going to have times where he's going to turn the puck over, he's going to make mistakes you're going to be able to point at and criticize him for, and fans will do that occasionally, and it's easy to do that when a player always has the puck on his stick and is always trying to create, because they're going to make some mistakes along the way. But he's just looked, Connor, much more the last few months like the Pastrnak that you expect to see than the guy we saw in the first half of the year that was struggling right along with everybody else. And it's a great point, Steve, that you make, that part of it too is I think frankly he prefers to play with Pavel Zacha. I think he wants to play with Pavel Zacha. And that puts Elias Lindholm in a tough spot. And it was never probably going to work between those two, even if it was the long-term organizational plan, because I think he wants to play with somebody else. And that's just part of the Pastrnak package.
Yeah. And it's also, you look at it, Joe, it is funny where living with some of those miscues and turnovers for guys that are highly skilled who have the puck on their stick all this time. It's like Bruins fans also probably hate Nikita Kucherov for making mistakes. And that guy is... You look at how effective he is. Any one of these guys that have the puck that often are going to make some mistakes here and there, but you live with it when they are carrying your offense, and that's what David Pastrnak has been doing this last month plus now. And it is something where I think the most impressive thing of this year for him, and it's why if this team somehow makes the playoffs, he should at least get some sort of heart, consideration. He's not going to win it, right? You got Draisaitl, McKinnon, all these guys that have been incredible, but I think the most impressive thing, especially the last 2 years for him, is that he's impacting the game beyond just sticking to the goal scoring, right? He's making plays. He's kind of giving what the other team is giving him in terms of if you're taking away his one timer, he's setting up his teammates. He's he can impact the game in so many different ways offensively, and I think that's why he's been so good. And it does make it interesting in terms of, I think it does feel like he likes playing with Zacha. Kiki's obviously been a good fit there. I think if you're the Bruins, ideally like to upgrade one of those two guys, right? In terms of the long-term ceiling for this team, but it also creates a spot where if Pastrnak and Zacha is a duo that you keep in place, and you can find other ways to upgrade other areas of your roster, maybe you also roll with that. But I think the impressive thing is you look at just the way Pasternak's playing again. If this team, even if they are moving pieces, does make a push for the playoffs or even makes it into the first round for some reason, a lot of it's going to come down to the fact that David Pasternak's just carrying this team right now. And it's been impressive to watch, especially, as you said, where he was at the start of this season. and how maybe he was just trying to do too much. The chemistry with Lindholm pressing in those areas, it just feels like right now, beyond the fact that he's scoring at such a high level, it feels like he knows what he needs to do on every shift to do enough to get this team's offense rolling in the right direction. It feels like he's got the answers now in terms of what his shift-to-shift approach has to be on the ice, and you've seen the results over the last month or so here.
Yeah, and he's able to execute that too, physically, which is another important part. And like for him, like as far as center goes, and like maybe having the best laid plans where you have like somebody you're going to bring in, and like in theory it's going to work. Like the thing about Pastrnak is like you almost don't need a strong centerman with him on his line, because he drives so much of the action from the wing, where you don't need that center that has the puck on his stick all the time. You know, you need somebody that can complement him and has good chemistry with him, but it isn't necessary to have a guy that's constantly going to have the puck at center when you have Pastrnak driving the line from the wing. He's just a unique player like that. So it causes sort of a unique situation that you should and could have on his line. And if he's got great chemistry with players like he has with Geekie and Zacha, leave it alone and let him score 60 goals, and you're going to be all set on that line. You know, especially where Geekie kind of knows his role, right? He knows that he's every once in a while going to be the one-time finisher when there's a ton of attention being paid to Pasta. He's going to be the guy that gets to the front of the net. He's a big body, and he can win battles in front and do like the grunt work as well. I do like that combination of those three players together. So I think, you know, they're definitely, that's their best line right now, no question about it. So you don't do a thing to touch it or tinker with it. You just let it roll. But like, we'll see what happens with them and how much they can carry them the final few months of the season and what happens with the playoffs. That's it for this week, though. Connor, Steve, thank you very much for joining us. Let's also thank our sponsors. Again, real quick, Prizepicks. Download the Prizepicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prizepicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prizepicks, run your game. Also, if you need any kind of tickets whatsoever, our friends at Gametime are ready to help you out. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. But again, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. What time is it, Connor?
Game time.
Game time. That's right. All right, Connor, Steve, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yep, thanks.
Everybody else out there, thank you for listening. See you at the rink.